Welcome to the Subjective Professor podcast, where we reject coercion and hypocrisy. It's Monday, March 17th, 2025. This is episode 337. Another one bites the dust. That's Trump who bites the dust and caves to the military-industrial complex and Netanyahu. But really, what's the difference? He bombed women and children in Yemen over the weekend and killed 31 civilians, right? One could argue that the Houthi fighters are or include women and children, but I don't know. So it didn't take that long for Trump to go from I'm going to end wars to starting a new war, 2 months, give or take. So again, no matter who you vote for, you get John McCain. Uh, well, hopefully you know that the background is that the military industrial complex, all the military contractors, everyone connected with making military weapons, and profiting through a lot of these foreign adventures have a lot of power and it's very difficult to stand up to them. I would imagine that they also are very influential on the economy as well. And so if you were to cut them off, then it would be extremely noticeable. It's probably why Doge has not audited the Pentagon yet, because I'm sure there'd be a lot of juicy information, a lot of juicy waste coming out of there as well. John McCain, of course, used to be in Congress. He passed away. He was a senator from Arizona, I believe. And as they say, he never saw a war he didn't like, always voted pro-war. Trump also is considering targeting Iranians in Yemen because the Houthis are being helped by the Iranians. And so he's saying, we're going to target the Iranians as well. And so because of that, it's kind of obvious that Israel or Netanyahu and his ilk, they want to target Iranians there to eventually go after Iranians in Iran. So it's becoming more and more obvious that this is more or less Netanyahu's foreign policy. They want to drag the United States into war. And of course, we have to invoke Washington's farewell address where he says, avoid entangling alliances. And I talked about that in an earlier episode. So I'm giving up on the idea that Trump is playing some kind of 5D chess to try to get out of Israel's grip. It's not likely. Plus, you don't have the Epstein list, you don't have the JFK files released yet. So I don't know what's going on. Maybe it's like tariffs. I'm going to release the Epstein files. Nah, I'm just joking. Maybe that's what it is. Who knows? But now it's just we're looking at economic ruin in the United States. And I guess it cannot come soon enough. Trump talking out of both sides of his mouth. He is definitely a populist, someone who lacks principles and is swayed by the simplistic uh, ideas, notions that he has the right answer to complex issues, and that all of these issues are not related to each other. So you can have an answer or propose a solution for this issue and then propose a solution for that issue and never have to worry about contradiction, double standards, or hypocrisy. But that is what you get when you focus on issues without any kind of principle. In other words, if he's looking at issues and trying to resolve them with a consistent principle, like, oh, I don't know, the Constitution, or maybe even just freedom, then he would not be able to make the same decisions as he's making now. And for someone who seemed to care about killing people, that changed pretty fast, or, the remorse of killing people just seems to end or be non-existent when it comes to certain people. And so now we just have a whole bucket full, truck full, nation full of hypocrisy. When you try to talk to people about these attitudes of imperialism, right, this pro-war mentality here in the United States, it reminds me of when I was studying theology, right, to become a pastor. I was studying theology, and I raised the question, what about the cultural component? And of course, I didn't articulate that until after I had graduated, and I was still struggling with identity issues. I talked about that, and but I just didn't know where to go. But everyone kind of said, yeah, this is non-biased, neutral theology that I was learning, and so it should be applicable to every culture without any kind of adjustment. And that just didn't work for me. So went to Korea, came back, and when I pointed out the North American bias into theological writings, a lot of people kind of looked at me in the way that conservatives look at people who are spouting off woke ideology, right? It was sort of like, oh, okay, dude, I'm not talking to you anymore. That's kind of what I got. Not just from non-Asians, but I got it from Asians as well because they bought into whatever they were taught and they were profiting from the way that this North American perception of theology, this North American biased theological training. But that's the feeling I get when I talk to people about U.S. foreign policy. Especially when you draw the connection that we are supporting Nazis and terrorists. So doesn't that make us Nazis and terrorists? If we were to use the same logic that the US imposes on the Houthis or on pretty much anyone. So it always worries me that other people, when they look at us, they racialize us, right? Do they see us as individuals? Probably not. Rather, they look at us as a racial category, that we're all Americans and all of us participated in the bombings of all these Middle Eastern countries. And I know that's what they believe. And so I know that when the tables finally turn, that indiscriminate bombing might happen. I don't know. It might, just might. And when it happens, it would be we would be helpless in the same way that third world countries are helpless now. I would raise that issue. I would say, can you imagine, like, let's just say Russia or China or Iran get so technologically advanced that they conduct raids here in the United States, right? And they kidnap people, oh, I don't know, like the Clintons, and take them back and put them in some Siberia, maybe, and put them on trial, right? Or maybe even torture them to get information. That would be an interesting thing. Like, what if the tables were turned? That would be perhaps, well, no, I take that back. They still wouldn't understand their own hypocrisy, right? It just, right? Hypocrisy is very difficult to spot in yourself. And I've talked about that extensively before, right? But because you understand why you are being hypocritical, you make excuses for yourself. And when you make excuses for yourself, you don't see it as hypocrisy. You just see it as, well, I had to. But you're a hypocrite, right? And building on that, I saw someone post. This is a meme, and it said, "I literally want my tax dollars to support national parks, science, education, conservation, mental health, and helping marginalized people." Right? I read that, and I just, I think she has a lot of money, right? And so, yeah, she has a lot of money to burn. But if that's the case, that you support all of these things, then why pay taxes? right? You can just directly fund them. They could have crowdfunding campaigns. Planned Parenthood. I tried to Google, try to find out when this happened, but it was a few years ago where people talked about defunding Planned Parenthood. And so they had a GoFundMe. I'm pretty sure it was Planned Parenthood, or maybe it was something else. I remember it as Planned Parenthood. And they did this GoFundMe and they raised more money than their annual budget. I don't think it was Planned Parenthood. It must have been, what do you call it? PBS, public broad, because Planned Parenthood budget is huge. I don't think they could GoFundMe that. But it had to have been probably PBS, Public Broadcasting System, right? The people who do Sesame Street in the United States. And so they did a GoFundMe and they exceeded their annual budget. Well, see, that's what you have to do. All of these programs, such as national parks, science, education, conservation, mental health, all of that can also be paid for by the people who need it, who want it, who are concerned about it, right? And so taxes don't need to go there. But socialism is not about where I want my taxes to be spent. No, socialism is about forcing other people to fund the things that you want, right? And I say, why should I have to pay for those things, right? That I don't want, which means that I can't pay for the things that I do want, right? And someone who is loaded, like this person is, has a lot of money, then they can say things like that. But people who are lower income, right? And I consider myself a little bit on the lower scale, like I'm definitely not. Well, come on, I was a professor, you don't make a lot of money. And and seriously, public school teachers make, like my niece who teaches third grade makes double what I make. And but anyway, but people who have a lot of money, they can, you know, say these things without any kind of consideration of how it affects lower people who don't make as much as she does. And on top of that, that's not what taxes are being used for. I mean, $36 trillion tells $36 trillion debt tells you that those taxes that you pay are not for all of these nice things that you think you're paying your taxes for. They're for war. It's for corruption, right? It's for insiders in the political realm to take from us to redistribute amongst their corporate buddies, right? All the lobbyists who come there to Washington, all the firms that the lobbyists represent. That's where all our tax money, tax dollars are going. If Doge and their audit of USAID didn't tell you that, then I don't know. I think you're being willfully ignorant. So there was that. Uh, I thought it was interesting also that the left is finding their voice again for the First Amendment, especially since Trump is cracking down on this so-called anti-Semitism stuff, right? Um, Pro-Gaza activists are being silenced. Some of them are being deported. Now, if they were just speaking, I just talked to my wife and she seems to believe that some of them that are being deported uh, were violent, right? That they did vandalize and do all these things, which probably could qualify as revoking their green card or whatever. But that's what they should be deported for, not because they said something that another country did not like. You know, this whole anti-Semitism thing that people are throwing around these days, it reminds me of it's the new racism, right? To call someone a racist, like, oh, you're racist, right? And you're supposed to shame you. Well, I think anti-Semitism is the new racism. So racism is played out. People have associated it with leftist ideology. So we're just going to do the same thing, except we're going to call it anti-Semitism. whatever, right? So those people on the left who seem to now be advocates of the First Amendment, yeah, it'll change once they're in power again. They'll silence people that they don't like. They'll silence the people who opposes them, right? And my only problem is that the Republicans are doing exactly the same thing by, silencing pro-Gaza protesters. As long as they're not vandalizing stuff, I mean, leave them alone. But as soon as they cross that line, damage property, then they have to be held responsible. Problem solved, right? You don't have to add this anti-Semitism thing. It's a sort of like hate crimes, right? And I did hate crimes recently in a recent episode. Yeah, there's no such thing as hate crime, right? All crime, unless you're going to go the other way and say all crime is hate crime. Now, next on the list of talking, what to talk about today is the auto sign, right? That Joe Biden did not actually sign most of the stuff, if not all of the stuff that was signed. And the one signature that was different was when he resigned and pulled out of the presidential campaign, right? After his horrendous performance at the debate. So accepting that signature, all of the other signatures were exactly the same. And people believe then that a machine, or it was just simply printed, right? That's why they're exactly the same, because you can't do that. You can't sign your signature exactly in the same way every single time. It just doesn't work that way. And so people are like, oh yeah, everything that he signed is invalid, all the pardons are invalid. Yeah, nothing's going to come out of it. That's my prediction. So usually I'm wrong. So now from now on, things that I want to have happen, I'm just going to say it's not going to happen. That way, maybe it will happen, right? Like the Epstein file will never be released. The JFK files will never be released. All of those secrets that they said they'll release, yeah, they're not going to get released. And so in the same way, there is going to be no consequence to the auto the fake signatures of Joe Biden. Ron Paul had an interesting point about it. He said that, but nothing will come from it. But it's a clear sign that government is out of control. Joe Biden, who could barely even remember where he was at any given moment, yeah, he signed all those things. He stayed awake long enough to sign all those documents. I don't think so. And plus, someone did research and they found out that some of the signatures were made when he was asleep on the beach, right? So how did that happen, right? A government out of control. So I just want to wrap up today's depressing, totally depressing episode by providing what I always do is think about hope, right? So hope for the best, but prepare for the worst, right? And so all along, all this time listening to and all the, I don't know, the last 20 episodes or whatever, 30 episodes maybe even, I never deviated from the plan that I had starting 20 years ago. Or when did I get married? 26, 27 years ago, right? And that is to plan for the worst, so prepare for the worst, but hope for the best. It's my form of hedging, right? So, uh, not knowing what's going to happen in the future, then you make sure that you save as much as possible. So the whole time I was hedging my bets, preparing for the worst case scenario, like what happens if the dollar collapses? What happens if all the stores are empty? And so also I tell my kids, carpe diem. You never know when everything is going to go sideways, so you take advantage of all your opportunities, right? You play it safe, but take advantage of all the opportunities, succeed and be great at something, which has nothing to do with the government, right? And live your life as long as you can, as much as you can, and then have a lot of great stories to tell your kids one day, right? So that's the thing. So the world may be coming off at the wheels, the wheels might be coming off the bus, but we still have to live our lives, right? So I refuse to be like those leftists who have a meltdown at every other moment over things that they have no control over, and yet running their mouths for solutions which simply do not work and will make our lives more miserable, right? No, that's not what we should be doing. We should always be looking for the silver lining, always looking for the loophole to exploit, always looking for, a way of making your personal life better, sharing that information and bringing other people into that state of awareness where they're not miserable all the time, upset, ready to have a meltdown at any given moment, or celebrate the wrong things, right? I saw all these posts celebrating Trump's bombing of the Houthis. That's obscene, right? That's not what you want to do. That is not hope, right? That's destruction. There's no benefit to the world and to society because of it. In fact, all you do is create more hatred, more violence, more terrorism. That's not the way to go. What we do is we hope for the best. What are we going to do? What comes after? And I'm sure that you've been following the news with all the rumors of the revaluation of gold. Uh, it's interesting, right? And gold today closed above 3,000, and that's pretty noteworthy. So, hope for the best, prepare for the worst, and I'll talk to you next time.